The air inside the royal palace of Zintra shimmered with a soft, golden haze, filtered through towering crystalline windows that stretched from floor to ceiling like frozen waterfalls. The palace stood atop a floating mountain, suspended above a sea of swirling violet clouds, its foundations anchored in ancient antigravitic stone, said to have been gifted by the stars themselves. Inside, the corridors pulsed with quiet energy, walls lined with bioluminescent vines that responded to footsteps, glowing brighter with each passing soul. It was a place of elegance and power, where silence was as heavy as tradition and every breath felt like a privilege. Yet in the medical wing, tucked behind a sealed arch of humming silver alloy, a different kind of tension hung in the air, one not of ceremony, but of uncertainty. A human man lay on a floating gurney, his skin pale, his breathing shallow, wires and translucent tubes connecting him to a cluster of hovering machines that chirped in alien rhythms. His name was Arlen Voss. He had not asked to come here. He had not even known this world existed until the sky split open and the skyships descended. Arlen had been an archivist on Earth, a quiet man who spent his days cataloging forgotten books in a crumbling university basement. He liked the smell of old paper, the way ink faded over time like memories. He wasn't a warrior, nor a scientist, nor a chosen one. He was simply someone who believed in stories, especially the ones no one else remembered. That was how they found him. Not through war, not through conquest, but because a single line in a 300-year-old manuscript mentioned a gateway beneath the northern stars, written by a mad astronomer no one had taken seriously. The Zintrians had been searching for that gateway for centuries. When they traced the reference back to Arlen's archive, they came for him in a beam of blue light that tore through the library roof, lifting him into the sky before he could even scream. He remembered the fall not of his body, but of his understanding. One moment, he was holding a brittle journal from 1782. The next, he was floating in a chamber filled with liquid light, surrounded by beings who looked like figures from a dream. Tall, slender, with smooth purple skin that shimmered like amethyst in moonlight, and hair like spun silver that floated around their heads as if underwater. Their eyes were large, pupil-less, glowing faintly like twin moons. They spoke without sound, their words forming directly in his mind, soft and melodic, like wind through glass chimes. He had panicked, of course. He screamed, he thrashed, he begged to be let go. But the being who approached him, a woman, though he only knew that from the gentle curve of her presence, placed a hand on his chest and calmed him with a single thought. You are not in danger. You are the key. That was days ago. Or was it weeks? Time moved differently here. The palace operated on a rhythm tied to the planet's twin suns, one blazing gold, the other a deep crimson. Their rising and setting created a cycle of 36 hours, but Arlen's body still clung to Earth's 24. He was tired, always tired, and now, after the procedure, whatever it had been, he lay broken and confused, his limbs heavy, his mind foggy. The last thing he remembered was pain, a searing heat in his spine, like fire being poured into his bones. Then darkness, and now this. The sterile glow of the medical chamber, the hum of machines, and the alien nurse standing beside him, her white hair drifting like mist around her face. Will I survive? He asked, his voice cracking, dry as dust. The words felt clumsy in this place where thoughts could be shared without speaking. But he needed to say them aloud. He needed to hear his own voice, to prove he was still real. The nurse did not answer. She looked away, her pale eyes fixed on the pulsing data screen beside the bed. Her fingers, long and delicate, danced over the surface, pulling up streams of symbols Arlen couldn't read. Her silence was worse than any answer. It was the silence of someone who knows something terrible but cannot say it. The silence of withheld truth. Arlen's heart pounded. He tried to sit up, but a sharp pain shot through his ribs, forcing him back down. His hands trembled as he looked at them. His skin, once tan from rare weekend hikes, now carried a faint bluish tint, like veins showing through thin paper. He flexed his fingers. They felt heavier, different. Outside the medical chamber, the palace continued its quiet life. Servants, shorter Zintrians with dusky lavender skin and no hair, moved in silent procession, carrying trays of glowing fruit and vials of shimmering liquid. Guards in polished armor stood at every arch, their faces hidden behind masks shaped like raven skulls, their weapons humming with restrained energy. Above it all, in the highest tower, the Empress watched. Her name was Larissa, and she was the last of her bloodline, the final heir to a throne older than human civilization. She had waited centuries for the key, And now Arlen was it, whether he liked it or not. The nurse finally turned to him. Her expression was unreadable, but her eyes flickered with something. Pity? Fear? You are changing, she said, her voice entering his mind like a whisper in a dream. The fusion has begun. Your body is adapting. Fusion, Arlen croaked. What fusion? What did you do to me? She hesitated. Then, slowly, she placed a hand on his arm. A vision flooded his mind. He saw himself lying on the table, surrounded by Zintrian scientists in flowing silver robes. Wires connected to his spine. A glowing orb, small, pulsing, alive, was being lowered into his back. It wasn't a machine. It was organic. A living crystal grown from the heart of the planet. They called it the Vathar, the seed of stars. It was said to contain the consciousness of the first Zintrians, the ones who had escaped a dying galaxy and seeded this world with their essence. Could grant immortality. Could unlock the gateway Arlen had read about. But it required a host. Compatible mind. A human mind. Arlen gasped, pulling away. You put a being inside me? It is not a being, she corrected gently. It is a seed. A spark. It will merge with you. If you survive the bonding, you will become something new. A bridge between species. A living key. And if I don't survive? She looked away again. Arlen closed his eyes. He thought of Earth. Of his tiny apartment with the leaky faucet. Of the old cat, Miso, who probably hadn't eaten in days. Of the students who used to stop by the archive just to hear him tell stories about lost civilizations. He wasn't a hero. He didn't want to be part of some ancient prophecy. He just wanted to go home. But home was light years away. Days passed. Or maybe it was only 2. Arlen began to change. His dreams were no longer dreams. They were memories that weren't his. He saw cities floating in the sky, oceans of liquid light, wars fought with thought alone. He heard songs in languages that had no words. And sometimes, in the quiet moments, he felt something inside him, small, warm, pulsing, like a second heartbeat. The Vathar was waking. His body grew stronger. He could lift the floating bed with one hand. His senses sharpened. He could hear whispers from the next room. He could see the individual threads in the nurse's robe. But the changes frightened him. One morning, he woke to find his fingertips glowing faintly blue. Another time, he sneezed, and a small burst of energy crackled from his nose, singeing the sheet. The nurse didn't laugh, but Arlen did. It was either that or scream. You're becoming more lively, she said dryly the first time it happened. I sneezed lightning, Arlen muttered, wiping soot from his nose. That's not lively. That's a hazard. She almost smiled. Almost. Her name was Nerine. He didn't learn it until the 3rd week, when she slipped and thought it in his presence. He liked the sound of it, soft, like wind over stones. She was not like the others. The Zintrians were graceful, yes, but distant, as if they carried the weight of eternity in their bones. Nerine, though, she had a spark, a dry humor. She once caught him trying to eat a glowing fruit shaped like a teardrop. That's not food, she said, snatching it away. Then why does it smell like mango? Arlen argued. Because temptation is universal, she replied. That's a memory pod. Eat it, and you'll relive someone else's life. Might be fun. Might be traumatic. Either way, no refunds. He stared at her. You're joking. She raised an eyebrow. Do I look like I joke? He laughed so hard he coughed up a tiny spark. Slowly, Arlen began to heal. Not just his body, but his spirit. He started exploring the medical wing, then the gardens, then the lower halls. The palace was a labyrinth of beauty and mystery. Fountains that flowed upward. Statues that moved when no one was looking. Libraries with books that sang when opened. He met other humans, 3 in total, brought like him from Earth, though none had undergone the fusion. They were scholars, engineers, a musician. They called themselves the accidentally chosen. They gathered in a hidden courtyard, sharing stories, trying to make sense of their new lives. One of them, a woman named Tessa, had been a linguist. She was the first to realize that the Zintrians weren't just telepathic, they were empathic. They didn't just hear thoughts. They felt emotions like colors. Sadness was deep blue. Joy was gold. Fear was sharp red. That was why Nerine had looked away when Arlen asked if he would survive. She couldn't bear to feel his fear while hiding her own guilt. She's scared for you? Tessa told him one evening as they sat beneath a tree with leaves that chimed in the wind. The fusion has never been done with a human before. The last host was Zintrian. He lived for 3 days. Arlen swallowed. And then he turned into a pillar of light and exploded. Took out half the eastern wing. He blinked. That's not reassuring. Tessa shrugged. But you're still here. That's something. Arlen looked up at the twin suns. One setting, one rising, painting the sky in streaks of amber and wine. I don't want to be a weapon. Or a key. I just want to be me. But what if you isn't enough? Tessa asked softly. What if the universe needs something more? He didn't answer. That night the dreams returned. But this time they were clearer. He saw the Empress, Larissa, kneeling before a great obelisk in the center of the palace. She placed her hand on it, and the ground trembled. A crack opened in the sky, revealing a swirling void. Stars fell into it. Worlds disappeared. And then, a voice, ancient and vast, spoke. The gate must open. The lost must return. The cycle must continue. Arlen woke gasping, his body drenched in sweat. The Vathar pulsed inside him, warm and urgent. He stumbled out of bed, ignoring the pain, and ran through the silent halls. He didn't know where he was going. He only knew he had to see the obelisk. He found it in the central atrium, a towering spire of black stone, covered in glowing runes that shifted like living things. It hummed with power. As he approached, the air thickened. His skin tingled. The Vathar flared, and suddenly he understood. The obelisk wasn't just a monument. It was a lock, and he was the key. Before he could react, alarms blared. Red light flooded the chamber. Guards appeared, their weapons raised. Nerine sprinted in behind them, her white hair wild, her eyes wide with panic. Arlen, stop! She shouted into his mind. You're not ready. I have to know! He cried aloud, his voice echoing. What are you hiding from me? The Empress descended from above, floating on a platform of light. She was taller than the others, her purple skin darker, almost royal violet. Her hair was braided with threads of gold, and her eyes burned with an inner fire. She looked at Arlen not with anger, but with sorrow. You were never meant to find this, she said, her voice resonating through the chamber. The fusion was to be gradual, controlled, but the Vathar has bonded too quickly. You are awakening before your time. Then tell me the truth, Arlen demanded. What happens when I open the gate? Silence. Then softly the Empress spoke. The gate leads to the void between stars. It is not a portal to another world. It is a bridge to the past, to our past. The Zintrians did not come here from another planet. We came from another universe. Ours collapsed. We escaped through the gate, carrying the last seed of our people. But the gate cannot stay open. It requires a living anchor, a mind strong enough to hold the rift. The last anchor died centuries ago. The gate closed, and we have been trapped ever since. Arlen's breath caught. So you need me to die? To hold it open? No. Nerine stepped forward, stepping between him and the guards. There is another way. The Vathar can stabilize the gate without consuming you, but only if you learn to control it. Only if you master the fusion. The Empress turned to her. That has never been done. No host has ever controlled the seed. Controls them. Then we make history, Nerine said firmly. Or we lose everything. Arlen looked at her, at the Empress, at the obelisk. He thought of Earth, of miso, of dusty books and quiet afternoons. And then he thought of the dreams, the falling stars, the voice in the dark. He wasn't a warrior. He wasn't a chosen one. But maybe, just maybe, he was enough. Training began at dawn. In a secluded chamber beneath the palace, shielded from the outside world, Nerine taught him. Not combat, not technology, harmony. The Vathar was not a machine or a parasite. It was a partner. It responded to emotion, to balance, to peace. Anger made it flare. Fear made it unstable. But calm, true, deep calm allowed it to sing. First, Arlen failed. Every time he tried to reach the seed, it surged, sending shocks through his body. Once, he accidentally opened a small rift in the wall. It sucked in a chair, a lamp, and half a tapestry before snapping shut with a sound like thunder. The palace staff were not amused. You're going to get us all killed, Nerine said, though her eyes sparkled with something like pride. I'm trying, he snapped. It's not exactly like learning to ride a bike. No, she agreed. It's more like learning to ride a supernova. He groaned. But slowly he improved. He learned to breathe in rhythm with the seed, to listen to its pulse. to let it speak to him in colors and feelings. He discovered he could project light from his hands, form shields, even float a few inches off the ground. He wasn't flying, but he wasn't falling either. One evening, as they rested in the garden, he turned to Nerine. "Why are you helping me? You don't have to. You could just let the Empress find another key." She looked at the stars. "Because the last anchor was my brother." He volunteered. He believed in the mission, but they didn't prepare him. They didn't teach him. They just used him. When he died, I swore I'd never let it happen again. Arlen was silent. Then he said, "You're a good person, Nerine." She glanced at him, a faint smile touching her lips. "Don't tell anyone. It ruins my reputation." He laughed, and for the first time since arriving on Zintra, he felt something like hope. But peace never lasted long. The attack came without warning. One moment, the palace was quiet under the twin suns. The next, the sky split open, not with light, but with shadow. Ships, jagged and black, descended like vultures, firing beams of dark energy that shattered the floating mountain's shields. Alarms screamed. Guards mobilized. The Empress activated the palace's defenses. Towers rose from the ground, firing beams of golden light into the sky. Arlen ran to the observation deck. Nerine was already there, her face pale. "Who are they?" He shouted over the roar of explosions. "The Kvash," she said. "Ancient enemies. They serve the void. They want the gate destroyed. Forever." "Why?" "Because if we return to our original universe, their power will be broken. They've hunted us across dimensions. And now, they've found us." A missile struck the west wing. The deck trembled. Arlen stumbled, but Nerine caught him. "You have to open the gate," she said urgently. "Now, before they destroy the obelisk." "I'm not ready." "You don't have to be ready. You just have to try." Below, chaos reigned. Zintrian warriors fought hand-to-hand with black-armored invaders. Energy blasts lit the sky. One of the accidentally chosen, a man named Raj, used his engineering knowledge to overload a power core, taking out an entire enemy ship in a blinding explosion. Tessa led civilians to safety, using her knowledge of Zintrian empathy to calm panicked minds. Arlen ran to the atrium. The obelisk was cracked, bleeding light. The Kvash had planted devices around it, pulsing with dark energy. He could feel the Vathar screaming inside him, reacting to the corruption. He placed his hands on the stone, and the world exploded. Not in fire, but in memory. He saw everything. The original universe, the collapse, the escape, the death of the first anchor, the centuries of waiting, the hope, the fear, the love. The Vathar wasn't just a seed. It was a story, and now it was his. He screamed, not in pain but in understanding. Light erupted from his body. The obelisk glowed blinding white. The rift tore open in the sky, a swirling vortex of stars and shadow. The Kvash ships faltered, pulled toward the void. But the gate was unstable. It wavered. Cracks formed in the sky. The palace shook. Arlen fell to his knees. His body burned. His mind unraveled. He could feel himself fading. Then hands on his back. Warm. Familiar. "Nerine, I'm here," she whispered into his mind. "You're not alone." He reached for her. For the seed. For the story. And for the first time he didn't fight it. He became it. Light filled the sky. The gate stabilized. The Kvash were pulled into the void, screaming. The rift held. But Arlen did not move. Nerine cradled him as the twin suns rose over the broken palace. His skin shimmered with starlight. His breath was shallow. His eyes, when they opened, glowed faintly blue. "Did we make it?" he whispered. She smiled, tears in her moon-like eyes. "We did. And you? How do you feel?" He looked at his hands, at the sky, at her. "Like I'm just getting started." The light that had surged from Arlen's body didn't fade. It settled into him, like embers sinking into warm ash, pulsing gently beneath his skin. The air around him hummed with a quiet energy, as if the very atmosphere respected the change. Nerine didn't let go of his hand. She couldn't. Not just because he was weak, trembling like a leaf in a storm, but because something had shifted between them. Something deeper than words, deeper than touch. It was as if the moment he opened the gate, their souls had brushed against each other in the vastness of the rift, and neither would ever be the same. She helped him to his feet, her arms firm around his shoulders, her purple skin glowing faintly in the residual light of the stabilized gate. His breath came in slow, ragged pulls, but his eyes, once clouded with fear and confusion, now held a strange clarity, like a sky after a long storm. He looked at her, really looked, and for the first time he saw her not just as a nurse, not just as an alien, but as someone who had stood between him and oblivion. "You stayed," he whispered, his voice hoarse but steady. "I told you I would," she replied, her thoughts brushing his mind like a soft breeze. "I wasn't going to let you face the void alone." He tried to smile, but pain flickered across his face. The fusion was complete, but it had cost him. His body was no longer entirely human. His veins shimmered with a faint blue glow when he exerted himself. His shadow didn't always match his movements. Sometimes it lingered a second behind, as if still catching up with reality. And when he closed his eyes, he could hear the Vathar singing, a low, rhythmic hum that resonated in his bones, like a lullaby from the stars. The palace, though wounded, still stood. The Kvash were gone, pulled into the void by the gate's gravity, their ships vanishing like smoke in the wind. But the cost was heavy. Towers lay in ruins. The gardens were scorched, and many of the Zintrians, guardians, scholars, healers, had not survived. The Empress, her regal composure cracked by grief, ordered the palace sealed, the wounded tended, the dead honored. And Arlen? He was neither prisoner nor guest. He was something new, a legend, a savior, a mystery. But in the quiet hours that followed, when the alarms had stilled and the smoke began to clear, it was not the Empress who came to him. It was Nerine. She found him sitting on a broken balcony overlooking the sea of violet clouds, his legs dangling over the edge, his hands resting on the cracked stone. The twin suns painted the sky in hues of rose and indigo, and the gate above still spun slowly, a silent sentinel in the heavens. "You're not afraid of me now, are you?" he asked without turning. "No," she said, stepping beside him. "I'm afraid for you." He chuckled weakly. "That's worse." She sat beside him, tucking her long white hair behind her pointed ears. "You opened a bridge between universes. You held back the Kvash. You saved us all. And yet, I can feel it. The Vathar is changing you. Not just your body, your mind, your soul. You're becoming more than human. And I don't know if you'll still be you when it's over." Arlen was silent for a long time. Then he said, "I don't know either. But I do know this. I'm still here. And I still remember my name. I still remember miso. I still remember the smell of old books. And I remember you." Nerine looked at him, her pale eyes shimmering. "You're not supposed to be real," she said softly. "You're supposed to be a vessel, a tool, a key. But you're kind. You sneeze lightning and laugh about it. You ask about the fruit because it smells like mango. You worry about a cat no one else has ever seen. You shouldn't be real, but you are." He turned to her, and for the first time he reached out. Not with words, not with power, but with his hand. Slowly, gently, he took hers. Her skin was cool, smooth, like polished stone warmed by moonlight. And when their fingers touched, something extraordinary happened. A pulse, a resonance, not from the Vathar, but from them. It was as if their emotions, his gratitude, her fear, her growing affection, his quiet awe merged into a single frequency, a harmony that vibrated through their bodies and into the air around them. The bioluminescent vines along the balcony glowed brighter. A flock of skybirds, native to Zintra's upper winds, circled above them, chirping in a rhythm that matched the pulse. They both felt it, and they both knew this was not just empathy. This was bonding. In Zintrian culture, such a bond was rare. It occurred only between souls who shared a deep emotional and spiritual connection, often between life mates, or between a master and apprentice who had walked the same trials. It allowed for deeper telepathy, a shared sense of well-being, even a faint echo of each other's thoughts and feelings. It was not love, not yet, but it was the beginning of something that could become love, if nurtured. Nerine pulled her hand back, startled. "That shouldn't have happened." "Why not?" Arlen asked, his voice quiet. "Because I'm a healer. You're the key. There are rules, boundaries." "Rules didn't save your brother," he said gently. "And boundaries didn't stop you from staying with me when I was dying." She looked away, her jaw tight. "You don't understand our ways." "I understand fear," he said. "And I understand when someone's trying to protect themselves. But you don't have to protect yourself from me." She didn't answer, but she didn't leave either. From that day on, their bond grew, slowly, quietly, like roots spreading beneath stone. Narine continued to care for him, but now her visits were longer. She brought him food, real food, not memory pods, and sat with him while he ate, amused by his reactions to Zintrian spices. "This tastes like cinnamon had a fight with a battery." She taught him more about her people, their history, their songs. And in return, he told her about earth, about rain, about music, about the way sunlight feels on your face when you don't have a care in the world. One evening, as they walked through the healing gardens, where new plants were already sprouting from the ashes, she asked him, "Do you ever miss it? Your world?" "Every day," he said, "but I miss it differently now. First, I wanted to go back, to see Miso, to walk into the archive, to hear English again. But now, I think I'd miss this more." She glanced at him. "You'd miss what?" "This," he said, gesturing to the garden. "The sky, the two suns setting in harmony, the way the air hums, the way the stars here sing at night, the way you look at me when you think I'm not paying attention." She froze. "I don't." "You do," he said with a small smile. "And I feel it, not just in my mind. In here." He tapped his chest. She didn't deny it. Their bond deepened in quiet moments. When Arlen had nightmares of the void, Narine would sit beside him, placing her hand on his forehead, sending waves of calm through their connection. When she was overwhelmed by grief for her brother, he would hum an earth tune, something simple, like, "Twinkle, twinkle, little star." And somehow, the melody soothed her, as if music was a universal language even the Vathar understood. One night, during a rare moment of peace, they stood together on the highest tower, watching the gate spiral slowly above them. Arlen could feel it now, not just as a force but as a presence. It was alive, waiting, and it was his to command. "I have to go through," he said suddenly. Narine turned to him. "What?" "The gate. It's stable now, but it's not just a bridge. It's a doorway to your original universe. Your people, they're still out there, aren't they? Trapped, lost, and I'm the only one who can bring them home." "You don't know that," she said, her voice rising. "You could be torn apart. You could vanish. You could." "I could," he admitted. "But if I don't try, then what was all of this for? The fusion, the pain, the sneezing lightning? I didn't survive just to sit on a balcony and eat glowing fruit." She stared at him, her eyes glistening. "You don't have to do this alone." "I know," he said softly. "I don't want to." And in that moment, their bond flared, not with power, but with promise. A silent vow. She would go with him, not as a nurse, not as a guardian, but as herself, as Narine, as the woman who had looked away in silence when he asked if he would survive, because she couldn't bear to lose him. Preparations began in secret. The Empress, though wary, agreed. The gate could not remain open forever. If Arlen could navigate the void and reach the other side, he might be able to guide the lost Zintrians home. But he would need protection. A suit woven from starlight fibers, a beacon powered by the Vathar, and someone who could anchor him to earth, to sanity, to life. That someone was Narine. She trained with him, learning to withstand the energy surges, to synchronize her mind with his. They practiced merging their thoughts, creating a shared consciousness that could endure the void's chaos. It wasn't easy. There were moments when the connection overwhelmed them, when Arlen's human memories flooded her mind, or when her deepest sorrows crashed into him like waves. But each time they pulled each other back. One night, as they rested in the training chamber, she asked him, "What if we don't come back?" He looked at her, then reached for her hand. This time, the bond flared instantly, warm and bright. "Then we'll be lost together," he said. "And that's better than being found alone." She didn't smile, but she leaned her head on his shoulder, and for the first time, she let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, the universe wasn't done with them yet. And high above, the gate turned, patient and eternal, waiting for the key and the one who held his heart to step into the unknown. The day the gate finally opened wide enough for passage, the sky wept stars. Not in sorrow, but in celebration. The Zintrian elders said such a sign had not been seen since the first exodus. A cascade of shimmering lights falling like silver rain across the violet clouds, vanishing just before they touched the floating mountain. It was a blessing, a beginning. Arlen stood at the edge of the atrium, clad in a suit woven from the threads of dying comets, its surface shifting like liquid night. The Vathar pulsed within him, calm now, resonant, as if it too had found peace. Beside him, Narine wore a suit of living light, her white hair bound with ribbons of star metal, her eyes glowing with determination and something deeper, love, no longer hidden, no longer denied. The Empress approached, her voice solemn. Once you pass through, there is no guarantee of return. The void reshapes all who enter. Even the key. Arlen glanced at Nerine. She gave the smallest nod. We're not going in to come back, he said. We're going in to bring others home. Hand in hand, they stepped into the light. The journey through the void was not one of distance, but of being. Time folded. Memory unfolded. They saw themselves as children. Arlen laughing in a sunlit park, Nerine gazing at the stars from her mother's balcony. They saw their fears, their dreams, their quiet hopes for a life beyond duty. And they saw each other. Not just as they were, but as they could be, older, wiser, surrounded by laughter, by warmth, by family. When they emerged on the other side, it was not into darkness, but into dawn. A world hung in the balance of two shattered galaxies, a refuge built from the remnants of their original universe. Cities floated like islands among the stars, held together by ancient Zintrian technology and sheer will. And there, waiting, were the lost, the exiles, the survivors, the ones who had waited centuries for a sign. Arlen spoke not with words, but with the Vathar, his voice echoing through the void like a song. He showed them the way. Nerine guided them, her empathy forming a bridge of trust. One by one, the Zintrians stepped through the gate, returning to Zintra, to their descendants, to their future. But Arlen and Nerine did not stay. They asked for nothing, no throne, no title, no eternal honor. When the last of the lost had crossed over, they stood together at the edge of the rift, looking not back at the palace, but forward, to a quiet place beyond the stars. There's a moon, Arlen said one evening, scrolling through a star map on a borrowed console. Third planet from the Helios belt. Temperate, blue oceans, green forests, no wars, no empires, just peace. Nerine leaned over his shoulder, her breath warm against his ear. And no one who expects you to save the universe. He grinned. Exactly. So they left. They took a small ship, a humble vessel designed for exploration, not war, and flew beyond the known systems, past the edges of Zintrian charts, until they found it. A small, radiant moon orbiting a calm blue planet, bathed in golden light. They named it Elera, a word from an old Earth poem meaning dream of home. They built a house on a hill overlooking a silver lake. It was simple, wood and stone and glass, with a wide porch where they could sit and watch the twin moons rise. Arlen planted a garden with earth seeds he'd kept in his pocket since the day he was taken. Tomatoes, basil, one stubborn sunflower that refused to die no matter how strange the soil. Nerine learned to cook with fire, not thought. She burned the first 10 meals. Arlen laughed so hard he sneezed a spark that lit the oven. They didn't need grand titles. He was no longer the key. She was no longer the nurse. They were simply Arlen and Nerine, a man and a woman, a human and a Zintrian, a bond forged in fire, tempered by love. And then, one morning, Nerine placed her hand on her stomach and smiled. It's glowing, she said. Arlen froze. Is that? She nodded. It's not just growing. It's singing. The child was born under a sky full of falling stars, just like the day they crossed the void. A girl, with skin the soft purple of twilight and hair like spun moonlight. But her eyes were deep brown, warm and human, just like her father's. They named her Lyra. She was the first of many. There was Kaelin, born with the ability to hum in perfect harmony with the wind. Mira, who could make flowers bloom with a touch. Talus, the quiet one, who spoke to animals in dreams. And little Soli, who, on his 3rd birthday, sneezed a tiny bolt of lightning, just like his dad. Their home became a haven, not of power, but of peace. Children ran barefoot through the fields, laughing, chasing bioluminescent butterflies that rose from the tall grass. Arlen taught them Earth stories, of dragons, of explorers, of cats who thought they were kings. Nerine taught them Zintrian songs, the kind that made the stars pulse in time. Sometimes, when the night was still, they would sit on the porch, the children asleep inside, and watch the sky. Do you ever miss it? Nerine asked one evening, her head on his shoulder. The palace? The duty? The exploding memory pods? Arlen chuckled. Not even a little. She smiled. Good. He kissed her forehead. I used to wonder if I'd survive, if I'd make it through the pain, the fear, the unknown. But I wasn't just surviving, was I? No, she whispered. You were becoming. And he had. From a quiet archivist to a bridge between worlds. From a man who feared the future to a father who built it with his own hands. Years passed. Their hair, his brown now streaked with gray, hers still shimmering white, grew longer. Their love, once a fragile spark, became a steady flame, warming everyone around them. One spring morning, as the sun rose over the lake, the children gathered flowers and wove them into crowns. They placed one on Arlen's head, another on Narine's. For the king and queen of nowhere, little Lyra announced. Arlen laughed. We're not royalty. You're our royalty, Kaelin said, grinning. And in that moment, surrounded by laughter, by love, by the quiet hum of the Vathar. Now peaceful, now a part of their home, not a weapon, but a guardian. They knew the truth. They had not just survived. They had lived. And their story, the one that began with a whispered question and a nurse who looked away, ended not with fire or war or sorrow, but with a house full of children, a sky full of stars, and a love that crossed universes to find its way home.